Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second installment of the 2025-2026 Northstar Career Center Family Education Night Series. My name is Holly Peel, and I'm the director of the Northstar Career Center. Northstar Career Center is dedicated to empowering teens and young adults with disabilities as they prepare for the workforce by fostering independence, confidence, and self-advocacy. Our 5 vocational areas, including business technology, materials handling, construction, hospitality, and veterinary assisting, prepare skilled employees for targeted growth sectors of the Central Virginia labor market. This evening, we are very pleased to be joined by Sara Thompson from DBHDS. She is our state's expert in supported decision-making and supported decision-making resources. And we are happy to have her with us this evening to share what these are and how we can go about considering this as an option for ourselves or for the young people in our lives. Sara, thank you for joining us.
So much, Holly, and thank you so much for Northstar as a whole for inviting me again this year. I always enjoy this evening, and thank you to you all for attending.
Thank you.
So this evening we are just going to be talking about supported decision making as it's a newer concept in Virginia, and supported decision making agreements as an alternative to guardianship. And so tonight's presentation is titled Your Voice, Your Choice, an overview of supported decision-making for students and their families. The quick overview of what we'll cover tonight. We will talk about some definitions for different decision-making options. We will look at supported decision-making. So why is it important and what does it mean to be a supporter? We will also dive into supported decision-making agreements, the benefits and risks of them, as well as some documents that we have created at DBHDS for Virginians to use. And then I just have a few frequently asked questions, things that we get asked more frequently, that hopefully will answer maybe some questions that you all have, but certainly we will have time at the end to also ask or answer any questions that you might come up with. So the first thing that we're going to do this evening is put on our thinking caps. So I want us to take a second and maybe reflect on our own decision making and think about, have you ever made a decision that didn't turn out well? It could have been maybe something today, earlier this week, or even years ago. That's okay. So thinking of that decision that didn't turn out well, two things. Did you learn something from this? And if you could, would you do things differently now? Now, this is all anonymous. You don't have to share anything for this part, but we are going to get into an interactive piece on the next piece. So, thinking of that decision, what kind of help would have been beneficial when you were making that decision in that moment? You can scan this QR code. I will also put in chat the link so that you guys can easily get to this. There's even an opportunity once you scan the QR code or if you hit the link, you can put in as many different things as would have been helpful for you, because sometimes you might need more than one thing to help you out. So I'll give you all a second to connect to that, and then I'm going to share a different screen. And if you can't get this to work and you want to put it in chat, that's totally fine as well. I will see that too. Hopefully you guys see this, but everybody's typing in. So far, I see assistance, maybe family perspectives, resources maybe beyond my expertise, maybe. I see a few people more typing in there, so we'll give it a second and see if anybody else is. If you were just joining, the question is, have you ever made a decision that didn't turn out well? And thinking of that decision, what kind of things would have been beneficial or helpful when you were making that decision? So reflecting back, what could have been helpful? Expert guidance. I see somebody put in the chat, like some disability rights experts, or other disability resources. Yeah. So I think it sounds like talking to people that were experts in something that maybe you weren't an expert in at that time would have definitely been beneficial. Okay. So when we think about making decisions and help with making decisions, sometimes things like having terminology explained in plain language can be helpful, or even maybe getting reminders when we have important dates or appointments to keep track of. I think you all mentioned this, or somebody did, at least getting advice from family members or friends, or researching online to better understand our options. Sometimes for some people, taking the time to think through a complex choice can be helpful. Or even making a pros and cons list. That can be helpful. And I'll tell you, I came up with this list. These are all things that are helpful to me. So hopefully some of these maybe are things that are helpful for you. But with this, these are all forms of supported decision making. So my hope throughout tonight is that you guys get a better understanding that, yes, tonight we're going to be talking about this idea of supported decision making and the context of it being something that people with disabilities can use when they need help making a decision. But really, it's something that we all use, and we already use it. We just maybe haven't used that term before. So really, when it comes to making decisions, we all get help. So I'm hoping that you guys feel more comfortable with this idea as we go. Now, I'm going to go back to that decision that you made, that one that if you could redo it, hope, you might redo it, or maybe you'd have some help redoing it, that kind of thing. But what if I told you that because of that decision, you could no longer vote, you could no longer drive, you could no longer make decisions for yourself? Decisions like where to live or to even be in a relationship with somebody. These are just some of the legal rights that people with disabilities in Virginia lose when they enter into things like legal guardianships and conservatorships. And it's really important that people understand this, as this is something that, I don't think a lot of people think about when they enter into that process of guardianship or conservatorship. And that they need to think through truly, what does it mean for the loved one or my loved one when it comes to their rights and their ability to make decisions. Because historically, people with disabilities have not been given that chance to utilize things like supported decision making and have gone straight into substitute decision making options when it comes to them becoming adults. So we are hopeful that through education, through partnering with groups like Northstar, that we can kind of share this information and spread that there are alternatives when it comes to people getting help with making decisions in Virginia. So I'm going to give you a little bit as far as some definitions go. So the first definition is supported decision making. And this is a decision-making model in which people make decisions through the support of people that they trust. So kind of what some of you talked about before, using people that you know, people that you trust, experts to get the information you need to make an informed decision. On the other side, we have substitute decision making. And substitute decision making is when other people, whether it's one person or even multiple people, are appointed to make decisions for somebody else. And typically this happens once that person has been deemed not able to make decisions for themselves. So this might be by a court determining that. This might be through a doctor or somebody else saying right now they don't have the ability to make those decisions for themselves. Now, when we're looking at this idea of decision-making, whether it's supported decision-making or substitute decision-making, I want people to understand that the idea or the practice and concept of just decision-making as a whole, this is a problem-solving skill. And this is something that has to be developed. It's something that we have to learn as we go through life. And really, it's something that can be started at infancy. So it is a skill that requires practice. It requires the opportunity to make mistakes and learn from them in order to continue to build it. And supported decision making is a concept that kind of helps with this decision making problem solving skill. It helps develop that skill more than the idea of substitute decision making. Some other terms that I will use throughout tonight are going to be decision maker and supporters. So decision maker, when I say this, that is the person who makes decisions for themselves with the people that they trust. And then supporters, these are the person or even multiple people that the decision maker trusts and who are open to supporting a decision maker with ensuring that they have the information that they need to make an informed decision, and in some cases, even assisting with communicating for the decision maker when maybe there's a situation where the decision maker uses alternative means of communication, or the other person that they're trying to communicate with isn't quite certain how the decision maker communicates. I'm going to share just a few graphics to kind of help better understand where supported decision making falls when it comes to the different types of decision making options in Virginia. So we break up decision-making support options into two areas. Again, supported decision-making and substitute decision-making. On the left with this graph, under supported decision-making is something that is looked at as being less restrictive because people keep their legal rights with any of these formal options. They also have the right to make their own decisions with any of these options. Some examples of formal ways of utilizing supported decision-making in Virginia are powers of attorney, advance directives, and supported decision-making agreements. On the right side of the chart, we have substitute decision-making, and these are considered to be restrictive because they can take away all or some of people's legal rights, and these options usually mean that that person's right or ability to make decisions for themselves is taken away. And these options include full or limited conservatorships, full or limited legal guardianships, as well as some forms of authorized representatives. This next chart goes through the different types of formal decision-making supports available in Virginia. Again, looking at least restrictive on the left through most restrictive on the right. And it even cites the specific code of Virginia if you are interested in researching more about this. So from least restrictive to most restrictive, we have supported decision-making agreements, advanced directives, powers of attorney, authorized representatives, temporary guardianship or legal or limited guardianship, and then full guardianship being the most restrictive. So I've got a quick video to talk
about the South Carolina Supported Decision-Making Project, a collaborative effort between Able South Carolina, Protection and Advocacy, Family Connection, and the ARC of South Carolina, funded by the South Carolina Developmental Disabilities Council.
A Better Way, Stories from the South Carolina Supported Decision-Making Project. A Family's Perspective.
Yeah, I like to hunt.
Carl is an incredible 21-year-old young man with a passion for life.
I thought the 9-point bud because since I got to know the word 9.
Excited about learning, excited about the world that he wants to live in.
I can be a tour guide in a museum.
Carl has some challenges with intellectual disability, and occasionally he needs me to explain something to him in a way that he can really, really get it.
This is 2, 3, 4.
If I go out and I get, I'm going to buy a car, I turn to my dad, I said, Dad, you know, this car, this has better mileage, this has this. I go to a friend and they say, no, you got 3 kids, you're going to need more space in the back seat, you're going to need this. And I get a lot of input from a lot of people. People look at me and say, oh, he has a lot of wisdom because he's willing to have supports from other people. Yet when a person with intellectual disabilities needs supports, we say they're disabled. And I don't see where the difference is.
Yeah.
Supported decision making is how do we, as all of us as human beings, surround ourselves with a group of people who will help us when the process of decision making is needed. And for Carl, I'd like it to be a very clearly documented and structural way that would happen.
I've been doing impressionist art.
It amazes me how many parents have jumped straight to guardianship because they're afraid someone's going to take advantage of their child.
This picture I did.
So I think parents go into it wanting to make sure that they can get medical information on their children, still help make medical decisions for their children, make sure that somebody doesn't take advantage of them financially and doesn't take advantage of them with decision making. So they think the cure-all is guardianship. The most painful things for me as a supporter of families of kids with special needs is for so many years, all I've promoted is guardianship. And that I did it because I wanted to protect our kids. I wanted our children to have a safe place to be. But I really did act out of fear. I have literally counseled parents to take away their children's civil rights. I had a change of heart when Able South Carolina sat down and met with me the first time, and Kimberly, the executive director, looked at me and she said, WC, do you want Carl special or do you want him equal? And that changed everything for me.
Do you want to get married one day?
Yep, I would. Yes. Yes, I would. If my dad let me to.
If I let you to, it's your decision, not mine.
I will do it, yes.
You're smiling real big.
Right.
Fear keeps us from moving forward. This is for not just disability world, for anything. But faith in the future moves a person forward. So I would rather walk in faith than I would walk in fear. And faith says, okay, I believe that there is a way to make this work. There are supports out there. You know, there's ARC, there's ABLE, there's Protection and Advocacy, there's Family Connection. There's a group of people out there that are willing to surround people and help them think through that process.
So that Yes, was from South Carolina, family in South Carolina, but the same options remain true here in Virginia as well for families. And we have a number of resources available that are linked at the end of this PowerPoint. So you guys will be able to get information about those different resources as well. So supported decision making as a whole is a way for people to increase their self-determination. And self-determination is when we're able to control our own lives, which is something that we all strive to do. Studies have shown that people who have a higher degree of self-determination have better health outcomes, more relationships with others in their community, and even better employment outcomes. I like to really note again on that health outcomes one, because it's not just physical health, but it's also mental health, and having better mental health outcomes can be a part of this piece of having those better relationships with other people in their lives. Additionally, self-determination leads to that sense of responsibility and independence and prepares people for maybe making those riskier decisions. Supported decision making is a way for people to advocate for themselves by not only making choices about what they do and don't want, but then being able to learn from those choices and decisions to be able to use that information then to continue to advocate for themselves and make decisions for themselves as they grow older. It's also something that everyone can use. So I hope by now that you guys are getting the fact that getting help with making decisions is normal. It doesn't have to just be because somebody has a disability or has a specific diagnosis. We all get help with making decisions. And that support's going to vary from person to person. It's going to vary based off of our own personal preferences, our own experiences. It's going to vary based off of our age, the time that a certain decision has to be made. And then even our own values are going to be playing into how we like to get help and what that help looks like. So it's going to change, and that's totally okay and totally normal. Supported decision making can be done informally, which is, I think, what most of you have already done when you just go to people, or I'll even throw in their technology, people that you trust, technology that you trust, to get a better understanding of what your options are so that you can then make that informed decision. On the formal side of it, that is when you actually create a formal document that says things like, who do you want to help you? What kinds of decisions do you want support with? And how do you like to be helped? And these can all be done in things like supported decision-making agreements, advanced directives, and power of attorney. And people with disabilities can actually have all three of these formal documents at the same time because they do different things. You might be thinking, though, as a parent, how do I build this decision-making skill? And what does it mean for me to be a supporter? To kind of build that decision-making skill might be kind of scary because it does involve some risk and taking risks and learning from them. But you can use some common things to help. So doing things like teaching or modeling to encourage people or encourage your loved ones with the decision-making process, talking through the actual steps of making a decision or what their options are. So maybe you can use things like visual prompts, so decision trees, or actually writing out a pros and cons list, talking through those different options. What are the possible implications, those long-term impacts, those short-term impacts, and maybe even modeling by saying, hey, if I was to make this decision, this is the choice I would make, and this is why I would make it. It's also important to allow for those mistakes. Now, when mistakes happen, that can sometimes mean that people's feelings are hurt, or, sometimes people even physically can get hurt with that. So validate those feelings. Be there to still be that comforting, supportive person, but also don't be afraid for them to not make mistakes because that's part of the learning process. Again, giving those opportunities to practice is so important to developing the skill of decision making. And when you are thinking about offering choices, sometimes the amount of choices that we offer is going to vary based off of a person's preferences, based off of the type of decision that needs to be made. So when it is something that you're kind of choosing, what are the choices that you guys are going to offer up or talk about, keep in mind your loved one's interests. It's super important that we as humans have options that are of interest to us. Otherwise, it's really hard to kind of make a decision or make a choice at all if I'm not interested in any options available. And then when you're actually providing that support as a supporter to your loved one or to that decision maker, you make sure that you learn and understand how they learn best. How do they take in information? How do they process things? Do they need those visuals? Do they need that extra time? Do they learn better by speaking through different things and talking about stuff? We all learn differently. So understanding how somebody learns best and providing information in that way is super important to this idea of supported decision making. The second thing that you should do as a supporter is know how somebody communicates. I can guarantee while not everybody uses spoken words to communicate, almost everybody communicates in some way. It just takes some time sometimes for people to figure that out. It takes some trial and error on our part too. So if somebody does need some assistive forms of communication, assistive technology or interpreters or anything like that, making sure that those supports are available and present when a person needs to communicate their choice and even think through their choices is very important. Next, you have to be clear about what you know and don't know. A person, the decision maker that is, will be coming to you because they trust you. They think that you've got the information they need in order to make their decision. So if it's something that you don't know anything about, or in some cases it could be a conflict of interest, please be upfront with the decision maker and then try to find somebody else who might be able to support. Because ultimately, in the end, your job as a supporter is to make sure that the decision maker has the information they need to be able to make that informed decision for themselves. And when we're looking at supporters, we can have natural supporters and we can have paid supporters. It doesn't have to all fall on you guys as parents. If you all are parents here tonight, I know that a lot does fall on you, but there's other people. You can look to extended family members. You can look to family friends or friends of your loved ones. There might be people in different organizations or community groups that you're a part of, neighbors, maybe even a coworker of yours or of your loved ones could be a natural supporter. Additionally, people that are paid to support your loved one can also be supporters. You've got amazing people at Northstar. Some of them might be open to serving in this role if you asked them. You also have doctors and various specialists and therapists. Maybe you guys have some lawyers or financial planners in your life, case managers, other providers of services and advocacy organizations. These are all people that you could look to and ask and say, hey, would you be open to being part of this support system for my loved one as they are going through this journey of supported decision making? And one thing I like to always remind people is that distance doesn't have to matter in this case because we live in a world of technology right now. So I've helped some people who have supporters in California. I have worked with some people who have supporters in New York. I've worked with people who have supporters in the United Kingdom and all the way in Israel. So people have been able to utilize and access people that they trust in their lives as long as those people are willing to communicate with them on a consistent manner or in the way that the decision maker wants to communicate and touch base with them. So we don't have to think just who's within our close physical network, we can go beyond that. In Virginia, we formally started recognizing supported decision-making agreements as a least restrictive alternative to guardianships and legislation that was passed in 2021. And we formed a work group in early 2022 to help us kind of figure out what does this look like for Virginians and to create some documents that I'll share with you all this evening. And one thing that we did as a work group and that we have continued to do anytime we look at making updates or creating new materials around supported decision-making is we've kept these 4 principles in mind. So the first principle is presumed capacity. So we presume that every person is capable of making his or her own decisions. It's actually even a law in Virginia that talks about when people turn 18, we presume that they're able to make an informed decision. Then the next principle is that we understand that people might need help from time to time when it comes to making decisions, as we all do. And that when that help is needed, we should always utilize the least restrictive option possible in order to maximize a person's autonomy and independence. The third principle then says that sometimes people need a little bit more support. Sometimes we might need a substitute decision maker. And in those cases, we ask that whoever is being that substitute decision maker, that they take into consideration what the person's preferences are when they are then making decisions for that person. And then finally, the last principle is this idea of dignity of risk. So we've already talked about how decision making is a life skill. It's something that has to be developed. And with that, making good decisions is a skill that has to be developed, and it takes practice and it takes growth. And we believe that everybody should have the opportunity to learn and grow from making mistakes, even those poor mistakes, and that those poor mistakes should not be motivation for restricting somebody's rights through things like guardianship or other forms of substitute decision making. Because after all, dignity of risk is not just about risk, it's about the right to make choices. And life as a whole includes risks for everyone. Just making a choice on its own can be a risk depending on who the person is, what the decision or choice is that needs to be made, and what else is going on in their life. And having those experiences and failing or, having those unfavorable outcomes, that is where growth and development come. So now we're going to switch over into the formal piece of supported decision-making, which is looking at the supported decision-making agreement. And this is the formal process of documenting who somebody wants to support them, what parts of life or what kinds of decisions do they want support with, and how do they like to get help? Because we all like to be helped differently. In Virginia, a supported decision-making agreement is made up of at least 2 people, the decision maker and at least 1 supporter. We also have this option of a facilitator, which I will talk about a little bit more here. So first, though, let's talk about the decision maker. In Virginia, again, the decision maker is the one that is making the decisions for themselves. So they are the ones creating the supported decision-making agreement. They have to be at least 18 years old. Right now in Virginia, you have to have at least an intellectual or developmental disability. However, you can have other co-occurring diagnoses. And you have to be legally able to make decisions on your own, meaning a judge or a court has not said that you can't make decisions for yourself. Supporters can be family members, friends, or anyone else that the decision maker trusts and chooses. And supporters can be different depending on the different types of decisions or situations that the decision maker wants help with, or the kinds of help that they want. So you might have one supporter for help with decisions around money, another supporter for help around decisions about health or medical needs, and then a third supporter who helps with decisions around work. You might have one supporter who comes to meetings with you and talks about options, and you might have another supporter who comes and helps communicate to others about what your decision is. It really all depends on around what the decision maker's preferences are and what those supporters are comfortable agreeing to. We also have this option of a facilitator. The facilitator is there just to kind of make sure that the supporters are doing what they are agreeing to as what is documented in the supported decision-making agreement. I do want to make it clear, though, that the supporters and the facilitator are not paid, as this is not tied to any type of funding. It's not tied to any service, waivers, anything like that. Supporters and the facilitator, if you have one, are all really there providing the support and service as a free natural support would. However, those tasks, the things that they are agreeing to do, are all documented formally in the supported decision-making agreement. Supporters and facilitators do not have the right to make decisions for the decision maker or to sign an agreement or consent on any forms for the decision maker, as again, the decision maker makes all those decisions for themselves. In Virginia, supported decision-making agreements are currently legally recognized, but they are not considered legally binding documents, meaning supporters and even facilitators cannot be sued for not fulfilling the roles that they are agreeing to within a supported decision-making agreement. Now, we talked about a little bit about some benefits when we looked at the idea of supported decision-making and self-determination, but same holds true when we look at the benefits of supported decision-making agreements. These are a way for people to keep their rights, but still get help and still keep the ability to make those final decisions. It gives the opportunity for people to live more independently and to develop their decision-making skills. It avoids the long and expensive legal processes when you're thinking about those substitute decision-making options, such as guardianship. That can take a long time to establish, and it's a lengthy process through the court, and it can be quite expensive for some people. Additionally, supported decision-making agreements can be created, updated, or changed, and even canceled at any time for free. Now, I will also touch on the fact of risks. As we looked at before, when we looked at dignity of risk, nothing in life is free of risk or danger. Studies have even shown, though, that guardianships are not a foolproof way of reducing or eliminating abuse and exploitation. However, an increase in self-determination and an increase in decision-making skills and education have been shown to reduce cases of abuse and exploitation. So that education, that learning, that support piece is super important in developing those skills where people can then reduce their chances of being abused or exploited. Additionally, we have lots of barriers around us. So society has barriers that can help prevent abuse and exploitation and reduce risks. We've got laws and regulations that reduce our chances of things. Our own resources might limit our ability to take certain risks. Like if I don't have enough money to sign a certain contract, then I'm not going to get approved for that loan for the car or for the apartment or whatever. So my own resources might limit my ability to take certain risks. As well as my own values. Our own values can play a big role in the risks that we are willing to take and not willing to take. But ultimately, when we think about this overall risk, one that really comes into play is this idea of failure. And we really need to look at failures different than we have. We tend to look at this idea of failure as being a negative thing, when really it should be a positive, because again, that's that opportunity to learn. That is when we can grow and really look at things differently for ourselves. So as a parent or caregiver, I challenge you to think like this. When we give them permission to fail, we give them permission to be brave. And you're also giving your loved ones the opportunity to learn and grow, to build self-confidence and self-esteem, and to develop the skills needed to be more independent. Now, I will say that one of the things that we were tasked with at DBHDS was addressing this concern of abuse and exploitation. So the work group that we had pulled together in 2022 did create a protocol around addressing abuse and exploitation for people with supported decision-making agreements. We created an entire educational series around it, and there are links here to those videos and slides, as well as links to some additional resources that can be helpful when it comes to learning more about how to prevent the abuse and exploitation of people with disabilities. Now we're going to look at some of the documents that we created. So this work group created a number of documents, one of the things being the Virginia Supported Decision-Making Agreement template, as well as some tools to kind of help think through the questions that are kind of asked when looking at creating a supported decision-making agreement. So one of the first tools that we created, we call them discovery tools, was the When Do I Want Support tool. And this is a check sheet that goes through common life areas and common tasks that adults make, or decisions that adults have to make in these life areas. And it's a check sheet where you go line by line looking at each decision or task, and you can check, is this something I can do on my own? Is this something that I can do with the help of somebody else? Or is this something that I need someone to do altogether for me, because even with help, I don't have the skill or the ability to do this yet. This tool is something that I've gotten a ton of feedback on. We've had teachers say that they utilize this to help in the creation of outcomes or goals on IEPs when they're looking more kind of independent living and skill development. It is something that I've had parents and caregivers say has been a huge conversation driver for them, where the loved one will fill out a copy of it, and then the parent or caregiver fills out another copy, and then they compare and they see, where did we align, or where do maybe we don't agree, and what do we need to do to address those disagreements? Maybe those are skills that your loved one wants to work on that you didn't even know about. The other thing with this tool is that it goes line by line in the same life areas and in the same types of decisions and tasks that are listed on the Virginia Supported Decision-Making Agreement template. So if you fill this tool out, it is pretty easy then to fill out the Supported Decision-Making Agreement template. The next discovery tool is the what kind of support do I want tool. Again, this is more check boxes, but we've listed common ways that people like to get help or support, some of which might look familiar to what we talked about in our opening activity. So things like maybe having plain language used when either speaking or looking at forms, sometimes maybe even getting help filling out forms. Doing some research to learn more about our choices, talking to experts, having more time to think through choices, even using technology to help communicate our choices to others. We've also provided space here where people can actually write in what are some other things that people like, or other ways that they like to be helped or supported. And sometimes we have a hard time thinking of those things, but I can guarantee most of us can think of a way that somebody's helped us that we did not like. So we do have a space where you can write out things that you do not like, things that are not helpful for you when you're looking for support or assistance. And then we have the relationship map. So this is a visual tool to just kind of lay out who else is in your life that you could potentially go to ask for help outside of even family. So it breaks it down to family, friends, people that support you at work or school, and then other people who support you at home or other places in the community. So again, this is an easy way to just kind of map out names. The decision maker's name goes in the center, and then the people that you're writing down, their names go closer to you, go closer to your circle based around how emotionally connected you feel to that person. So the people that are closest to the decision maker circle might be the people that that person trusts the most. Again, it doesn't look at physical closeness, it just looks at emotional closeness. And the people that are listed a little bit further out on that page, maybe those aren't the people that the decision maker is going to look to ask to be supporters. And then we've got the supported decision-making agreement template itself. It covers all different kinds of day-to-day scenarios and decisions throughout our life. So looking at different types of decisions and tasks we have to make when it comes to our health and personal care, friends and partners, our money, where I live and community living, school and education, working, my rights and safety, meeting and talking with my supporters. And then we also have this other section where if there's something that we haven't thought about, you can add it there. Each of these life areas or sections has the ability to really personalize it, but we know that we can't think of everything. And there might be that one thing that you want help with that doesn't really fit in any of these categories. So that's what that other section is for. The supported decision-making agreement template also incorporates these sections. So we have other types of support. This is a place to indicate if there's other ways that somebody gets help. Like, does somebody have an advance directive or a power of attorney or somebody that helps them with their money? Those are all there's space on the agreement to document whether or not those formal supports exist. There's the agreements page where the decision maker and all supporters sign and date. There's an easy cancellation section. So if the decision maker no longer wants a supported decision-making agreement, they sign and date in this one box, and that's it. If there is a facilitator, there is a separate agreements page for them because they are agreeing to do some different things. We also have a page if you would like for the agreement to be notarized. In Virginia right now, it is not required, but it was something that we heard from the public was something that they wanted. So it is as an option, but it is not required. And then we also have some pages where people can easily document any updates or changes to the agreement. These are just the first few pages of the agreement. So again, this is our cover page, our first page where it says whose agreement it is. And then also this is the space where people can check and fill out the other types of support somebody might have. And you might choose to make this an entire packet. You might say, I have an advance directive as well as my supported decision-making agreement. And when I give this packet to somebody, I'm going to include my supported decision-making agreement and I'm going to include my advance directive. Each life area is done the same way. It's going to list the life area and then either I do or do not want help with this life area. If you say that you do not want help, you check that, then you move on to the next life area. If you say that you do want help, then you would fill out who the supporters are, the people that you are looking to for help with this life area. And then you just go through these different types of decisions or tasks under each life area. There'll be a drop-down box where you can check or select Y for yes or no, N for no, that you don't want help or support with this decision or task. And then you indicate, is it all of the supporters up here that I want support from or help from with this type of decision, or only some of the supporters, and who are they? Because our preferences for who we get help from can vary from decision to decision. And then finally, this is the agreements page where the decision maker and supporters will sign. If you have more than 3 supporters, totally fine. You can make copies of this page, as many as you would like. And then this is that cancellations part. If the decision maker decides that they no longer want a supported decision-making agreement, they write their name here, sign it, and put the date, and then the supported decision-making agreement is void at that point. We've created a host of other documents to help with this. We've got detailed instructions to help with the discovery tools and with filling out the supported decision-making agreement. We have some release of information forms that are done in plain language. So one for your medical records at a doctor's office, as well as for education. So I will say this is just for like K through 12 education. It's not something that colleges necessarily will accept, but this is a form that the Department of Education has reviewed and signed off on, where it allows a student that's 18 to say, yes, I'm 18 and I still have the right to make decisions when it comes to like my IEP and services at school, but here's who I want to still be involved in this process, whether it's being notified of appointments, being notified of meetings, coming to meetings, those kinds of things. We also have a tracking tool so you can easily keep track of who have you given a copy of the agreement to and when, so that if there are updates, you make sure they have an updated copy. We've got frequently asked question forms. And then we also have a few documents that were created to kind of help you think through, okay, based off of the kinds of things that I want help with and how I want to be helped and the people I put on my relationship map, how do I pull all that together to figure out who could I ask to be a supporter? And then once I identify those people, how do I ask someone? So we've given a script, whether it's something you want to read or even a letter format that you can email or mail to somebody. Another thing that we created is a self-advocacy pocket card. This was done with a group of self-advocates over the past year, and it is a card where you can keep it in your wallet, and it just lets people know that you have the right to make decisions for yourself. And with that also means the right to ask for support or to ask for help. It references Virginia laws and codes that talk about people's rights, and then it also can link to a letter that we created with the same group that provides even more information and details, just in case there's somebody that's like giving a little bit more of a hard time when it comes to honoring somebody's rights and their ability to make decisions. This is all available online. However, we did get these cards printed on a really nice, like thicker plastic material for durability. So if that's something that you all want, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to mail you guys some, or I can even get some to Holly so that Northstar has some there at the school as well. All of these resources and information can be found on our website. It is the DBHDS website. So you will go to dbhds.virginia.gov. You'll click on for individuals and families. Then a little box will drop down where you can click on developmental services and then click on supported decision making. I will let you know that we are in the process of updating our website. So the homepage has been updated, but each individual page is getting updated. So mine is still in the process, but is hoping to get fully updated soon to be able to access all the features like changing in different languages and that kind of thing. Though I will say that the discovery tools and the Virginia Supported Decision Making Agreement template are available online in English and Spanish. They are available as Word documents as well as fillable PDFs. So those are all available to you guys to use. However, if another language is needed, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I am happy to work on getting something interpreted. Next, we just have a few FAQs or frequently asked questions. So the first thing is supported decision-making or supported decision-making agreement right for me. So hopefully, again, you guys have seen that supported decision-making is something we all utilize. But to be able to use a supported decision-making agreement in Virginia, you have to be at least 18, you have to have an intellectual or developmental disability, and you have to legally be able to make decisions for yourself. The next thing is, how do I create a supported decision-making agreement? I say with time. It's a lot of information to think about. So take your time to think through this process. I'm always happy to work with families or people, decision makers on this process. And I usually tailor it to that particular person. I've worked with some people who we do it all in one meeting. And I've also worked with some people who we break it into different, one session, we look at a different discovery tool, or sometimes we look at different life areas. I have one family I've been working with for 3 years because we started this process when their loved one was 15 and now they're getting ready to turn 18. And we've just kind of been working on these skills and thinking through things over the past 3 years. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. Anyone can help. And I'm certainly happy to help you guys if you're interested. The only thing I ask, though, is that ultimately in the end, before we can truly finalize and sign that supported decision-making agreement, the supporters have to be in agreement. They have to agree to what is written on the document, and they have to be available to sign. We can do that virtually, or they can be physically present to sign. That's totally fine. I just need some agreement knowing that the supporters are on board with what's written. And do I have to use these forms or the Virginia Supported Decision-Making Agreement template? And that answer is no. You can create your own document, your own supported decision-making agreement if you want to. We do ask that if you do create your own, that you do keep these 4 elements within that. So who does the decision maker want as their supporters? When do they want help? How do they want to get help? And then that everybody signs and dates. I will also note that we are in the process of working with a new work group on creating a smaller version of the Virginia Supported Decision-Making Agreement template. It should be a lot reduced. So a lot less pages, more accessible. So some different wording around it, which means that it won't be quite as detailed as this current version is, but we are trying to provide some options so that people can kind of see what works best for them and their wants and needs. But again, you don't have to use those if you don't want to. And then if you're already using supported decision-making, why create the supported decision-making agreement? Formalizing this process of supported decision-making by creating the supported decision-making agreement helps ensure that people's choices and rights are honored. There are sometimes people in the community that might feel that just because somebody has a specific diagnosis or disability, that they automatically don't have the ability or the right to make decisions for themselves. And a supported decision-making agreement can kind of show people that, no, I do have people in my life that I trust, who know how I learn, who know how I understand things, and are there to support me so that I can make that decision or that informed decision. And ultimately, as a community, when we recognize supported decision-making and supported decision-making agreements, we are saying and acknowledging that people with disabilities have rights and have the ability to have autonomy over their own lives. And then finally, when should we begin talking about decision-making options? I say it is never too early or too late. As we talked about, this is a skill. It's something that we are always working on and always developing. So it is something that we should always have conversations about. If your loved one wants to create a supported decision-making agreement, I fully support that, and I'm here to help you in that process. But I also hope that you guys don't look at it as a one and done kind of thing, that you think we'll continue to kind of revisit it as our preferences, our skills, our knowledge, all of those things change with time. So once it's created, we have to keep revisiting it and see what needs to be updated or changed. And so I will leave you with this. I hope that, as Nelson Mandela said, may your choices reflect your hopes and not your fears. So I'll put my contact information up here.
This was awesome. It was jam-packed as usual, Sarah. Thank you. I could spend another all day tomorrow, I think, chasing down all those links and seeing all the resources that are available. I know that I've used some of these resources in the past. You're probably familiar with the fact that we do a countdown to employment curriculum on Fridays in Career Center, where we specifically focus on self-determination, self-advocacy, all those sorts of parts of managing our own career specifically, because Career Center, but these things come up a lot. And they're excellent tools, whether our students wind up becoming involved in formal supported decision-making agreements or not. They're excellent tools for conversation. And I've got 2 teenagers at home myself, and these have informed some of my conversations with them about, why can't I have a computer? And when are you going to stop checking my phone? And let's talk about what kind of supports you need when you're this age and when those things fade back. They hate it when I use them as examples, but there you go. We had one really, really good question. I appreciated how you explained this, but it is a finer, nuanced point for those of us who aren't legal professionals. You talked about how a supported decision-making agreement is a legal document, but not legally binding. Could you review that one more time and help us grasp the nuance of those differences?
Absolutely. So it is legally recognized in the sense that supported decision-making agreements are referenced in Virginia code. So Virginia code recognizes supported decision-making agreements, lays out some pieces with it. Another piece of Virginia code says that when people are looking at guardianships, they actually need to look at lesser restrictive alternatives first and determine if those are appropriate. And that it specifically says in that piece that supported decision-making agreements are one of those lesser restrictive alternatives. So that's why we say it's legally recognized. It is in Virginia laws. It is not legally binding, so in the way that things like power of attorney, legal guardians, even there are codes in Virginia around the roles and responsibilities of the people that are serving as either the legal guardian or the agents in a power of attorney that specifically say, here are your roles and responsibilities, and you are required to meet these, otherwise X, Y, and Z. There are repercussions for not meeting those requirements and roles and responsibilities. Right now, the way that code is written for Virginia when it comes to supported decision-making agreements, there isn't that kind of language. So there aren't repercussions, if you will, if somebody says that they are going to be a supporter, they agree to it. They agree to what's written in the supported decision-making agreement, they sign and date as a supporter, and then they fall off the end of the earth and don't return the phone calls, don't come to meetings, don't provide that support. There's really no legal repercussion for that piece. So that's kind of what I mean by them being legally recognized, but not legally binding.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I almost feel like I need to read some case law in order to understand that on a deeper level, but I do appreciate that clarification. It does help. Would you mind going back to the slide? I love your slide with the spectrum of decision-making and different types of legal decision-making supports and arrangements that are in Virginia. I think it's incredibly helpful for us to spend some time on that slide.
Right. I hope this doesn't make anybody sick by doing this.
You're good. There we are. Oh.
Is it this one?
Oh, wait, no, the one before. Okay. So one of the reasons why I think this slide is really helpful, especially if a supported decision-making agreement is starting to feel a little bit abstract or a little squishy with the whole, it's not legally binding, but is legally recognized piece, is this really shows the difference between legal arrangements that are supported versus those that are substitute decision-making. And we have a lot of families whose young people in their lives have a disability that's developmental in nature. And one of the things that they're really thinking about as that 18th birthday looms is, do we think about guardianship? Do we think about guardianship in the short term? How do we weigh this out? And nobody's made a crystal ball yet where it can be really, really clear what's going to happen over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years, as that young person continues to grow and develop. And you got to love it when that frontal cortex comes in, keeps coming in through age 30. And what is the right call for the family. And it's one that rightly our families really struggle over. And so this diagram, I think, is incredibly helpful. One of the things that a lot of parents think about is guardianship, but they plan to only have it in the short term. And you know what? For some families, that's going to be an option. And I know there have been a couple of times when you've talked about how supported decision-making agreements can be developed in tandem with that, so that as the person continues to grow through those critical, like 18 to 25-year-old years, they can also be demonstrating more and more decision-making, and hopefully eventually grow out of the need to have guardianship. So I wanted to highlight that. That's something that I think was helpful to our families in the past to think about. The other thing is to think about the advanced medical directive and power of attorney. We're going to talk about those more at length next month in the second part of supported decision-making. And how those tools can be used to support folks as well. And we might be more familiar with those because those are not legal tools that are specifically designed for people with lifelong disabilities, but we could all use those tools depending on where we are in our lives. And I also wanted to highlight, and I'm going to drop in the chat a link to the Disability Law Center of Virginia, which also has a lot of supported decision-making resources and especially focuses on ways that like an advanced medical directive can be used in circumstances, especially if the nature of the disability or the person's life stance results in periods of time when that person may be making decisions that aren't true to their long-term planning goals and values, or maybe that might be a substance abuse issue, or it could be a number of other issues. And there are ways to put clauses in those advanced directives that can help reflect their longer term wishes, even when they're having those shorter term periods of time when those things might seem a little bit more disconnected. So that's another excellent resource. So there's a lot of creative ways to use these. We don't necessarily need to default just to guardianship. The other piece I would highlight is that I think traditionally one of the ways when we think about risk management and guardianship, we think a lot about like signing up for credit cards, right? And these days, you don't have to have a credit card to get in all kinds of financial trouble, right? You just hop on Venmo and have trouble there. And that maybe doesn't necessarily involve entering into a contract. So one of the things that these do is they're more universal, right? They're starting those conversations and they're not caught up in those things that are a little bit more time bound that the law has a hard time keeping up with, like digital money and other kinds of online networking agreements. I think it's
there's, I think to that point, Holly, education plays such an important part in anybody's life as far as developing skills. And I think that there have been a ton of studies that talk about just education and how that helps anybody as far as those risks go. And there are a number of organizations that provide amazing education and training for people with disabilities, as well as their loved ones and family members around specific topics. I've tried to link some of them to some resource slides in this PowerPoint that I know you guys will get a copy of. But if there's a specific topic that you're questioning or wondering about, I'm always happy to get other resources out there, because I know there's ones around relationships, what's a safe relationship versus not, how to respond if you're feeling like you're in an unsafe relationship as a person with disabilities, then for people without disabilities, how to better support people with disabilities that might be in unsafe relationships. There's a number of trainings around money management and better education around money. I mean, heck, things I wish were around when I was a teenager.
No kidding, right? Yeah. I never would have joined Columbia House.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Was that like 10 CDs for a penny? Yeah, right. So, there's lots of other resources and education out there that I'm always happy to connect people to, because I think that it really is important. It's an important piece. We don't all know everything. We don't turn 18 and know everything. We aren't then adults and know everything. So trying to find who are those credible experts that have put together this kind of information and resources in a way that are digestible are really helpful. And I've been trying to kind of, as I find those, I keep them and and will happily connect people to them. So
yeah, we try to keep those on our community resource page as well. Happily, there seem to be more and more higher quality resources coming out for a lot of those topics. We're always trying to corral them. Great question in the chat. Is the SDMA something that one would just keep on file? Or when would you have to produce it to show it to someone or some entity? Great question.
Oh, that is a great question. So I usually say that, yes, the decision maker keeps a copy and all supporters should get a copy. And then anybody that is in the decision maker's life that could potentially be impacted by the types of decisions that the decision maker wants support with. Excuse me. So if somebody wants support with educational decisions, then the school you would want a copy of it, or I would recommend giving them a copy. If they want decision or support with decisions about medical decisions or healthcare, then doctors or therapists should have a copy. And certainly when I'm saying this, one thing that I tell parents or decision makers and families that they can do is you can just give the section that pertains to that specialist or that person. So the doctor could have that cover page, the signature or agreements page, and then just the healthcare section. They don't have to see the rest of your business. Just the sections that pertain to that entity. And that's that tracking sheet gives you ideas of who might be good people to give copies to.
So maybe one nuance to explain would be like, let's say a person is going to the doctor, right, for a regular visit, and maybe the person travels independently, maybe had assistance making the appointment, and on record with that doctor is a release of information for this loved one that, they're allowed to get information if they request it. The person goes to the doctor's appointment and it results in some sort of decision making about treatment. The doctor is not necessarily going to reach out and say, hey, would you like to have this supportive person here for the conversation about your treatment options? They're not necessarily going to initiate that without this supported decision-making agreement on file, right? So that's kind of the difference between a release of information, if that person reaches out and asks the question, versus, hey, this is a notification that someone who is treating me might need to reach out and include them in a decision-making conversation. Another example might be with financial decisions as well. Like if I would imagine that would be more like working with like a financial advisor, right? There's one thing where someone's allowed to know information, and another thing if they should be involved in decision-making agreements. And then finally, those cards are available because sometimes we do have people who have biases and might I say prejudices about who gets to make their own decisions. And this is when the person can say, hey, I have the right to make a decision. I get to do this. So that's another way of equipping someone with that information. Sometimes I know that we've got folks who exercise the right that's available in Virginia to put on their legal ID or their driver's license to say maybe that I have some sort of different way of communicating, whether that's a disability or a different communication style, to notify law enforcement if they ask for their ID, that it says right on there that, maybe I have a hearing issue, or maybe I'm on the spectrum, so I verbally communicate differently. Then that's another thing that they could produce at that time to let people know that, yes, I do make my own decisions, but I need you to communicate with me in a certain way. So that's another instance where that kind of evidence might be useful.
Great idea, Holly. Thank you.
Great questions. I learn something every time I hear you talk about this. And now I just have all kinds of links I want to follow up and do some research. Families who are participating, especially if you're Northstar families, and most especially if you're Northstar Career Center families, whose students are going through the candidate profile process right now, If this is something you would like to specifically explore for your family, that is great information for us to have. These are incredibly, incredibly personal choices for every family, and every family has navigated this differently to date, and I imagine that will continue to be the case moving forward. We are here to support you and explore these with you. And the more we know about what you're thinking and where you're coming from, the more we can try to support and facilitate that process. And we always also want to respect your privacy and your family's autonomy. So we never want to cross over that boundary. So the more we can talk and understand your family's journey, the more we can provide resources and supports and make sure that the things that we're talking about here in school are supporting that process. So thank you all, those of you who participated. If you are streaming this later, thank you for logging on and doing that. Please feel free to reach out to me or to Sarah. She has included her contact information if you have any follow-up questions. And we hope that you will join us next month for the second installment of Supported Decision Making, when we will cover other legal forms of supporting people in the state of Virginia. Thank you so much.